Welcome, students, to the lecture 12 Little Rules of APA and Writing. This lecture will help you become a writer by teaching you the 12 most common errors that students make when they're writing papers using APA format. This lecture is meant to accompany the 12 Little Rules of APA and Writing guidelines that you can find in this week's module on the course site. Let's get started. Rule number 1 is about writing numbers. When you write numbers in APA, you write out numbers below 10 and use digits for numbers 10 and above. For example, I saw 20 students working in 2 classrooms. Note how the number 20 is written as a digit because it's above 10, and 2 is written as a word because it's below 10. However, if a number starts with a sentence, always write it out. 13 crows flew by. That's written, even though it's above 10, that's written as a word because it starts a sentence. Rule number 2 is about periods inside quotation marks. The rule is punctuation goes inside quotation marks after a quote at the end of a sentence. Look at the example. Here we have a quote that comes at the end of the sentence. The teacher stated, "My class uses a variety of technology." Notice how the period goes before the quotation mark. Rule number 3 is about periods after citations. Citations go before periods if they come at the end of the sentence, or periods go at the end. For example, feedback is an effective way to raise student performance. Jones, 2018. We are citing an article written by Jones in the year 2018, and notice the placement of the period. It comes at the very end. If you are citing a quote, put the citation after the quote, but before the period. So many teachers favor formative assessment. There's our quote. Jones, 2018, page 367, and then once again, the period goes after the citation. Rule number 4 has to do with how you cite. When do you use a page number in a citation and when you don't? And the rule is this: if you are quoting a source exactly, you need a page number in your citation. If you're not quoting, don't use a page number. So for example, look at the first example. Jones, 2018, discusses formative assessment. There's no quote there. You're referencing an article that you're reading and you're going to be discussing, but there's no exact quote, so no need for a page number. However, look at the second one with the quote. Jones, 2018, page 213, states, "Summative assessment should be practical." Here we have a quote, so you need to put the page the quote is on. If you're quoting from a website, give the paragraph number instead of a page number. So for example, body language is a type of formative assessment. Smith, 2019, paragraph 2. That tells us this is a website and the quote is found in the second page of the website. Rule 5 has to do with capitalization in quotes. We capitalize the beginnings of quotes if they're complete sentences, even if they occur in the middle of a sentence in the paper. For example, she stated, "I think medication is a good idea for some students." Because that sentence, "I think medication is a good idea for some students," can stand on its own, we capitalize the first word just as we do with a regular sentence. Rule 6 has to do with capitalizing proper nouns. Only capitalize proper nouns, the names of specific people, places, or things. Most general nouns do not require capitalization. So for example, I liked Principal Herrera, but many principals need more training. Principal Herrera is the name of a specific person, so it's a proper noun, so we capitalize principal. But look at the second example. I would like to be a principal one day. That does not require capitalization. It's not the name of a specific person, so it is not a proper noun and does not require capitalization. Rule 7 has to do with how you capitalize titles of books, magazines, articles, etc. So instead of underlining them the way you would in many styles, APA requires that you italicize them and capitalize important words. For example, Little Women is a work of fiction by Louisa May Alcott. Notice that the title of the book is both capitalized and italicized. Semicolons are used to separate two complete sentences that are related. Each sentence needs to be able to stand on its own. If it cannot, use a comma instead. So for example, I studied hard for the test. I earned an A. Both parts of that sentence can stand on their own. I studied hard for the test. I earned an A. And they're related ideas, so we may use a semicolon. However, I studied hard for the test, unlike many others. Those both can't stand on their own. Perhaps I studied hard for the test can stand on its own, but could you make a sentence? Would unlike many others on its own be a sentence? No, so it requires a comma and not a semicolon. Rule 9 is about verb tenses. Be consistent with verb tenses in your paper. Try to stick with one unless there's a reason for the change. Many times students will switch between the present and the past tense, and it makes reading difficult. Let's look at an example of a sentence that might be in a paper that's right. I interviewed, notice past tense, Ms. S. She described, past tense, how she starts her class every day with a bell ringer. Why did we suddenly switch to present tense? Well, because in the first two verbs, interviewed and described, Ms. S. was talking about her interview, which was in the past. But when you switch to she starts her class, that's what she's describing that she does every day. And presumably she's continuing to do it. A wrong sentence or two to write would be, I interviewed Miss S. Past were good. Then she describes how she started her class every day with a bell ringer. Well, describes, we suddenly switch to the present tense, but our interview is still in the past, so that doesn't make sense. And how she started her class every day, she's still starting her class, so again, past tense there doesn't make sense. The rule is generally if you do an interview, most things are written in the past tense, unless the interviewee is talking about something they're doing in an ongoing manner. Rule 10 has to do with apostrophes. Use apostrophes for two reasons, to show possession or to use it in a few contractions. Don't use apostrophes to make plural nouns. Let's look at an example. To show possession, the cat's toy was a feather. The toy that the cat owned or possessed was a feather. So there an apostrophe is appropriate to show possession. When you use it in contractions, it takes the place of a letter that you've dropped. So for example, this isn't on here, but think of the contraction can't. C-A-N apostrophe T. In that case, the apostrophe is taking the place, the can't is substituting for the word cannot, and the apostrophe is taking the place of the second N and the O. Similarly, in its, IT apostrophe S, it's taking the place of the words it is, and the apostrophe is substituting for that second I. Many students misunderstand its, IT apostrophe S, and its, ITS. IT apostrophe S means it is, and as I said, in this case, the apostrophe takes the place of the missing I. It's going to snow today. If you can substitute it is, it's a contraction and requires an apostrophe. But its without an apostrophe just means the thing that belongs to whatever comes after it. For example, the flower opened its petals. You can't substitute the words it is there. The flower opened its petals. It doesn't make sense. So there you don't need the apostrophe. So the rule with its is if you can say it is, use the apostrophe because you're creating a contraction. If you cannot say it is, don't use the apostrophe. And there you see another wrong example of just tacking on an apostrophe with a plural noun. The girls went to school. There's no reason for that because, well, it's not showing possession and it's not a contraction. Rule 11 is about talking to the reader. Don't tell the reader in your paper what you're going to discuss, just start discussing it. So don't say, now I will talk about my observation, or now here's what I'm going to cover. Just start covering it. I observed a second grade classroom of 20 students. Rule 12 is about introductory phrases. Introductory phrases require commas. Let's look at an example of an introductory phrase. It's a phrase that comes at the beginning of the sentence and seems out of place. In order to earn a good grade in the course, comma, I studied for the midterm for 5 hours. That's an introductory phrase, in order to earn a good grade in the course. It seems out of place because we could pick it up and move it more naturally to the end. I studied for the midterm for 5 hours in order to earn a good grade in the course. It wouldn't need a comma if it were at the end, but because we've taken it out of its natural place and moved it to the front of the sentence and separated it, it requires a comma. So that's the rule. If you can move it to the end and have it make sense, it's probably an introductory phrase if it occurs at the beginning and it requires a comma. That's the end of this presentation. I hope that this presentation has helped you learn 12 little rules of writing in APA. Feel free to email the instructor through the course message system if you have questions.